Have you ever heard of the Mantell 295? Probably not, unless you're an avid watcher of paranormal YouTube channels. But when it was first discovered in October of 1967, it made headlines all over the country. On October, amateur radio operator J.E. Mantor was working from his home in Santa Ana, California. He was attempting to contact a local ham radio club when he picked up what seemed to be a distress signal from an unknown source. At first, he assumed it was a local broadcast accidentally picking up a foreign frequency. But after listening for a few minutes, he realized this was something unusual. So he began recording. And thankfully he did, because whatever he picked up has never been explained even to this day. In today's video, we'll be examining the Mantell 295 and looking at some of the most terrifying details surrounding the case. Welcome back, I'm here. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss another video. As I mentioned in the intro, in October of 1967, amateur radio operator J.E. Mantell was contacted by an unknown transmission while trying to contact a local radio club. Of course, back in the late 60s, there weren't things like caller ID, so Mantell didn't know who or what he was talking to. But this wasn't a casual conversation. Whoever or whatever was on the other end was clearly in distress. And although we may never know exactly what was said that night due to the poor quality of the tape, we do have a transcript released by the CIA years later. The Mantell 295 started off with what sounded like heavy breathing, followed by the unintelligible muttering of phrases too strange to decipher. After about a minute, the voice suddenly stops and a new sound begins. It sounds like someone tapping on the body of a spaceship. This goes on for a full 13 seconds before the mysterious voice returns. It says, "Please, please," before once again falling silent. More banging is heard, and this time the tapping almost sounds like Morse code. Then the voice comes back saying, "Mayday, Mayday." At this point, Mantor realized that whoever he was speaking with was clearly in danger and tried responding, but his calls were ignored. The Mantell 295 then continues with more banging and whispering, which was transcribed as "fast, fast, fast, go, go, go." Another pause and the voice returns. It says, "This is alive. Is anybody out there? Over." Unfortunately, the recording ends right after this and we'll never know what came next. It would be easy to dismiss this case as nothing more than a hoax, but here's where things get interesting. Mantor wasn't the only one who picked up the transmission that night. In fact, radio operators all over Southern California reported hearing similar signals. Although most of them didn't pick up the voice, Mantor's recording was enough to pique the interest of the local police who took the tape to be analyzed by experts at the nearby Naval Weapons Center in China Lake, California. At first, they believed the recording was likely nothing more than a prank. But after reviewing the tape, they returned it to the police with the cryptic message that it was of possible extraterrestrial origin. This is where the case gets really confusing because soon after the analysis, both the police and the Navy began claiming that no such report had ever taken place. In a letter addressed to Mantor, the police thanked him for his cooperation but stated, "The matter has been investigated, and no unusual activity of the type you reported has been found." Years later, Mantor would claim that the lead investigator on the case, Sergeant John Nelson, told him personally that the tape had been sent to the CIA. Mantor said that Nelson told him that the CIA didn't believe it was of extraterrestrial origin, but instead claimed that it might have come from Russian operatives trying to test America's early warning system. Now, this isn't too far-fetched considering that during the late 60s, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union was heating up. But there's a twist. After the case went public, a CIA spokesperson denied that the agency was involved in any way, further stating that it was highly unlikely that the CIA would take possession of a tape recording made by an amateur radio operator. So why did the police send the tape to the CIA in the first place? Well, they didn't, or at least they shouldn't have. To this day, the entire incident remains shrouded in mystery, and even though there are many theories surrounding the case, none of them make much sense. The first theory is, of course, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Considering that there were multiple reports of UFO sightings in the weeks leading up to the Mantell 295, it's easy to see why many people believe that aliens were responsible. However, the biggest problem with this theory is that there's no real evidence to support it. Yes, there was a UFO sighting in the area just 2 weeks prior to the Mantell 295, but that's about it. It's possible that the two are related, but it's also possible that they aren't. The second theory is the Russian hypothesis proposed by the police and the Navy. This one seems plausible since, like I said earlier, the Cold War was in full swing, and if the Russians were going to try and test America's communication systems, this would be a clever way to do it. However, again, there's no proof that the Russians were behind the transmissions. The third and final theory is that the whole thing was a hoax. Some people believe that Mantell fabricated the entire story for attention, while others think he genuinely recorded the transmissions, but they were of a mundane origin. For example, some have speculated that the voice may have belonged to a person in a metal box. As for the banging, it could have been caused by anything from construction work to fireworks. Although none of these theories make much sense, it seems likely that the case will never be solved. Even if the transmissions were real, which they very well may have been, the lack of evidence makes it difficult to pinpoint an exact cause. In 1968, Mantell attempted to shed light on the case by conducting his own investigation. He bought time slots on several local radio stations, offering a reward for anyone with information on the mysterious transmissions. Although he received hundreds of phone calls, none of them were helpful. Now, I don't want to jump to the conclusion that the Mantell 295 was a hoax, but it's important to note that a similar case occurred in April of 1967, just 6 months before the Mantell incident. In April of 1967, a man named Gordon J. Creighton was operating his ham radio when he received a transmission unlike any other. The voice on the other end identified himself as Captain Baldock from the crew of Apollo 204. According to his log, Captain Baldock was relaying information about an upcoming spaceflight that was scheduled to launch in July. Of course, you'll probably recognize this name as Apollo 11, the very first manned mission to land on the moon. But there was one small detail that didn't quite add up. In July of 1969, Apollo 11 did indeed launch and make history, but Apollo 204 never existed. Like the Mantell 295, the audio from the April transmission was incredibly poor, making it difficult to hear every word being said. But fortunately, Creighton was able to record the conversation. Just like the Mantell 295, the recording starts with heavy breathing, followed by a voice that can't quite be understood. Then the voice becomes clearer and states that it's from an American ship. He says he's relaying information about the launch of the next ship, which is scheduled to leave in about 6 weeks. He then gives a countdown from 10, saying that this is their 4th time around the moon. He also mentions the name Stafford, which happens to be the name of the commander for Apollo 10. Again, the conversation is garbled and hard to understand, but the information being given is completely false. For example, at one point the captain mentions that the men on board will spend 3 days on the surface of the moon. We all know that the Apollo mission spent no more than 2 days on the surface. He also says that the men are planning on bringing back rock samples. But of course, they wouldn't bring back any samples until Apollo 11. Perhaps the strangest part is that the captain mentions that NASA is expecting a call back from the astronauts, but there's no way they could have expected a call back. Remember, these supposed transmissions took place 4 months before Apollo 11 even launched. In the end, both the Mantell 295 and the April 1967 transmission remain a complete mystery. And although there are plenty of theories, we may never know the truth. But now, it's time to hear from you. What do you think really happened? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. See you next time.